there was a story that I was reminded of. In ancient India, there was a very well-known musician, a sitar player, but who was very peculiar. He did not play just for anyone. In fact, it was so rare to hear him play for a public, an audience. Enough so that many people had come up with poetry describing, giving accolades of the fame of this one particular artist, musician. And the news gets all the way to the Maharaja, the most wealthiest king in India at that time. Now he's curious. He's like, okay, who is this man? Is he still alive? And they say, oh Lord, yes, yes he is. He says, I would like to have him come and play for my court, for my audience. And they say, oh no, he doesn't say yes to just anyone. But he says, I'm the Maharaja. I'm the biggest king, I'm the biggest guy on the land. So his ministers say, well, let us go and try to convince him. But he's very picky about his audiences. So finally they somehow convince him to at least come to see the Maharaja. And he does, out of respect. But he says, great king, in order for me to be playing for you and an audience, I have to give I have to have a test. And in fact, I have some preconditions. And he says, the king says, whatever you want. He says, no, don't just say whatever you want without hearing me out, because it's pretty radical, my demands. And he says, okay, tell us. He says, tell me about the biggest court you have, the biggest room, the hall. How many people can it contain? And he says, 100. He says, okay. How many doors does it have? He says, let's say 6 main doors. He says, I want you to guard those doors with your best of your henchmen, best of your swordsmen, executioners in fact, with their sharp swords waiting in hand. He says, okay. And he says, I want them to stand guard at each of these gates, these doors. Once I start playing, he says, I want your Grand Vizier, the Grand Minister, to start counting the heads that will be moving with the rhythm of the raga. When I start playing, he says, and when the heads start wobbling like this, moving with the sound, with the music, I want your guards to count each of those heads, and then he says, I will pause, maybe 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes later, and I want you to have your guards come and pick them out of the audience, take them outside, and decapitate, cut their heads off. He says, that's pretty radical. And he says, yes, but that is my price, he says. And then I'll start to play for the rest. The Maharaja says, okay, let's do that. But he says, you must let the audience know before I start playing that these are the rules, so they can restrain themselves from shaking the head. Otherwise, it's their life on the line. Fair enough. So it's announced, and everybody who's somebody in the kingdom shows up, gets a special invitation. So they come to the court that day. Everybody is restraining. They're like, I can't believe I'm going to be this great sitar player is playing, and we will be there as a witness, as audience. So you don't move your head, I don't move my head. So everybody's making that deal. So they sit, and he starts playing. The doors are closed, the guards are there with their sharp swords inside, looking in, counting very carefully how many heads are moving. Some people are restraining themselves, sitting like this, because the music is so moving. Finally, some people give in, knowing full well that their heads will be rolling. They said, I don't care. I'll give up my life. This is just too much. This is just beautiful. I give my life willingly, just to listen for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So he plays, 30 minutes pass, 40 minutes pass, and the names are being counted. You moved your head, you moved. The others are sitting like this. My head is not going to be cut off. Finally, he stops and he says to the Maharaja, to the king, King, all these heads. Meanwhile, the king's head also moved. Yeah, because he was living that moment. And now, the people who were really taken by the music, they didn't care. They said, so what? So what? It's just one life. Let me give it all to this heavenly, divine music. And then they're about to take these people who moved their heads out to cut off their heads, and he says, Maharaja, wait. Please don't touch these people. The other ones, he says, who were sitting without shaking their heads, without moving, take them away. No one's head is going to be cut off, he says. Just take them away. They don't deserve to listen to my music. It's only those who have given up their life to listen, he says. Those deserve to stay. So the court is cleansed from all those who were not there with the right heart to listen. No one's head was cut off, but they were taken away because they didn't deserve it. So I share that story with you, and you take it however you like. The Dhamma is the greatest. And from far away, many people came, sacrificed so much to listen to Lord Buddha teach. And that is what we're sharing for 2,600 years almost, if we're lucky to hear it. And you are quite fortunate to hear it. But had you not showed up, I would still be here, sharing the Dhamma that is coming from Lord Buddha. Last week we had a hiatus because we had a skip of a sutta like this session because I was very sick, because I had overexhausted myself for the last almost 3 months, shy of 1 week, I think, that I've been here, non-stop. So I had not drunk enough water, liquids, and not enough sleep, not enough healthy, diet, etc. So the body gave in. So just so that you know. But I'm glad to be back, and I'm also glad to have my voice back. So we're going to be talking today about the same character we have encountered. I've covered with you in the past, the Sangyojana Sutta, if you remember, on the fetters. I think it was the first sutta of the 3-day retreat we had, where we met with Chitta, the householder. So today we meet him again. Remember, he's so notable, he was so important as a layperson. He was a Dhamma teacher, a layperson. He used to teach bhikkhus, mahatheras. And he was recognized by Lord Buddha himself as being the foremost in giving Dhamma talks among the lay people. Plus he was an anagami, not a bad thing to happen to someone. So in this sutta, we see Chitta, the householder, going to meet Venerable Kamabhu asking him some questions. If you notice, it says Dutiya Kamabhu Sutta. Dutiya means second, or part 2. Part 1 is one day Venerable Kamabhu asks him a question about a verse that Lord Buddha had given, about a chariot. A lot of symbolism there. So he asks him, Chitta, come over here. I would like you to ask you this question. What did Lord Buddha mean by this verse? So the verse involves, a white chariot, this and that, the poles, all these things. So there's a lot of symbolism, movement. And the first thing he asks Chitta is, Venerable One, was this verse given by Lord Buddha himself? That is what a wise student asks before they engage in any kind of exploration, elaboration. We're not interested in debates. A true Dhamma teacher is never interested in debates. We don't have time. That's why so many people send emails, things like that to me. I don't have time. I mean, I have to be really, something must be really out of the norm for me to say, okay, this person really needs some jolting. But I will never engage in a debate. Life is too short for that kind of nonsense. But at the first thing we need to know is this really coming from Lord Buddha? Hence, does this really need my clarification? Maybe it's Jain's Mahavir. I don't have time for that. To say which one's better, we don't have time for that. Oh, and then Venerable Kamabhu says, oh yes. And Venerable Kamabhu was an arahant. He cannot lie. So he respected him immediately. He's like, okay, Bhante, and he elaborates. And at the end he says, it is quite fortunate for the sasana to have a layperson like you to keep the sasana alive. And that's why I encourage, I try to mention, not venerable, but in many ways he was a venerable, Chitta, the householder. I mention his name quite a bit so that you are encouraged by his example. All of you who are lay people, 2,600 years later, we still can recall his name and the wonders that would come out of his mouth. So have that in mind. Give yourself that extra boost, that sense of, as a layperson, I do have hopes, I am able to attain the highest fruits in this sasana. That's a novel idea. Because I see so many times that people place themselves too low. That's not right. Lord Buddha taught it for everyone. Lay or monastic. No difference. So here we have Samyutta Nikaya, connected discourses, where we have Sutta number 41.6, and it is the Dutiya Kamabhu Sutta, with Kamabhu part 2. So it doesn't have to be the same day, but it is with the same protagonists. Chitta and Venerable Kamabhu. Again, they're interacting and they are having a very interesting discussion, as you will find out. Not a normal conversation, even for Dhamma talks, because this goes deep into something that is pretty advanced. The subject matter is pretty advanced, and it already places both Chitta and Venerable Kamabhu, obviously, on a different level, on a high level. Just from the questions, you will see that. This is not a normal conversation. This has a lot to do with high meditative attainments, especially from the person who's asking. He's not just trying to gather information for the sake of gathering information. So many people go and join this group, that group, learn this sutta, that nikaya, this, so that we can use that as a material for new chit-chat, more knowledge to gather, which creates more jargon, more stuff for intellectual acrobatics. nonsense as far as the Dhamma, as far as Lord Buddha's teachings are concerned. You might just take this much of the Dhamma and apply it, that's it. That's enough. Lord Buddha didn't say go ahead and learn the whole Nikayas. Never did. So many people I see, they want to be part of this group, that group, this group, already. It's like 12-step program, we call it in America, like Alcoholics Anonymous, addicts. They leave the alcohol, supposedly, but they become addicts of something else. I've had students who were addicts, ex-addicts, but they were now addicted to taking part in these meetings. Some of them 12 times per week. Some of them 5 times a day. Well, that's another addiction. It is an addiction. You just change the tools, the things. So please don't make the Dhamma into something like that. Take this much, take whatever, use it. You don't have to be part of so many different groups and this and that to feel good about yourself. No. One is enough. Apply. And if it's so overflowing, you have so much extra time in your hands, go ahead and join others. Fine, there's no rules to that. But how much of your energy is going into the right place? So, take whatever you can from the sutta and apply it as best as you can, but not as a gathering of information. So this comes from the Salayatana Sangyutta section of the Sangyutta Nikaya. Salayatana, if you remember, it is in relation to, Salayatana are the 6 sense spheres, the 6 sense spaces, the eyes all the way down to the mind, right? Eyes, ears, nose, etc., etc. But from the Salayatana Sangyutta, it comes from the subsection called the Chitta Sangyutta, dedicated to Chitta, the householder. Because there's so many suttas included in that section. And then we have the Chitta Vagga, which is the grouping of Chitta Suttas, and then finally we get to the Dutiya Kamabhu Sutta, which is this. So here we see Chitta asking about 11 questions from Venerable Kamabhu. Specific questions related with the sankharas. Sometimes translated as formations. I don't like that word. When someone says formations, I'm immediately taken to geology, formation of rocks. It's like, what is this? Formation. It has some elements of formation, forming. Construction would be something also. Also, activating energy is another. I like to now translate it as habitual tendencies. It fits a lot better to the actual flavor of sankharas, the way I understand it. Formations for me is too out there. I can't touch it. It's too abstract. The late Venerable Bhante Nyanananda used to call them preparations. They prepare you for a certain type of action. It's underground. It's a propulsion. It is a motivating, impelling energy. From where? Motivated by what? Your past actions. Be they from the body, from your speech, or from the mind. Sankharas. But it doesn't stop there. The questions will change, you will notice. After he gets to address the questions on the sankharas, Chitta then is going to directly jump into an area that is so specialized, that is the domain of both anagamins and arahants. Specifically, Sanya Vedaita Nirodha Samapatti, cessation of feelings and perceptions, which is many times it's referred to as the 9th jhana. And sometimes Bhante Nyanananda would call it the 8th jhana proper, the Buddhist 8th jhana. I will say a few words about that in a minute. So this is again from the Samyutta Nikaya, Sutta number 41.6. Dutiya Kamabhu Sutta. At one time, the Venerable Kamabhu was living in the Ambataka wild mango orchard in the Machikasanda province. When the householder Chitta approached the Venerable Kamabhu and after paying his respects, sat down to one side. Then the householder Chitta, while seated at one side, said to the Venerable Kamabhu, Bhante, how many sankharas, activating processes or volitional actions are there? That's another way of describing sankharas, volitional actions. I've also heard that being used. And there's not just one usage. Please remind yourselves of that, depending on the context. That's why Pali is such a rich, rich language. Don't ever trust one translator by saying, this is what this word means. That's not appropriate, depending on the context. If we learned anything from Lord Buddha, that's it. Always look at the context. Don't just do things in isolation, in a bubble. The Dhamma is not in a bubble. It's everywhere. So you observe it with maturity and wise approach. So he's asking about the sankharas. How many are there? Now, it doesn't mean that he didn't know this. Remember, they like to play this game, this Dhamma game, if you will. Because remember, the first Patama Kamabhu Sutta, it was Venerable Kamabhu who was asking him about what did the Buddha mean by this verse? Chitta. And now it's Chitta's turn. How many sankharas are there, Venerable Kamabhu? So he says, householder, of these there are 3, which are the bodily sankharas, the verbal sankharas, and the mental sankharas. Sadhu, Bhante, he says, replied Chitta in delightful agreement as he continued on. Now he was known within the Sangha, Chitta was known as a Dhamma teacher in his own right. I mean, he was actually named, as I was saying earlier, as the premier, the #1 in lay community, males, in being the top Dhamma teacher. So I'm sure there are other bhikkhus sitting around listening carefully to this conversation. But what, Bhante, are the bodily sankharas? It's not like he didn't know. He knew, but he's just getting a different point of view, perhaps, from Venerable Kamabhu. What are the verbal sankharas? And what are the mental sankharas? Householder, the in and out breathing, those 2, are the bodily sankharas. Thinking and pondering are the verbal sankharas, while perceptions and feelings are the mental sankharas. Sadhu, Bhante, says, replied Chitta as he approved with delight, while inquiring further. Years ago, when I was studying this, I was like, wait a minute. How can thinking and pondering be verbal sankhara? One is verbal, the other one is thinking. So this is vachi, this is thinking, pondering. How can this, what's the connection? And then finally you get to understand as you're practicing, as you go and research, understand, look at different suttas, because this happens to be a set of questions which we also see in 2 other major suttas. Suttas that we find in the Majjhima Nikaya. Do you know? Maha Sutta and the Chula Sutta. the questions and answers, or exposition sometimes translated, of series of questions and answers, the great discourse on that, and the shorter discourse on that. One was between Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Maha, they were asking these questions, and obviously there were more questions there, but these questions about the sankharas, and then we'll see the cessation of perceptions and feelings, they were also asked. So these were very heavy-duty questions, very important, which designate the advancement of the practitioner. This is all experiential-based stuff. This is not just some teaching. And in that case also you had two arahants. In that case it was two arahants, but they were very aware of these nuances of practice. So when Venerable Mahakotita went with his students to Venerable Sariputta asking these questions, they asked simply for the sake of the other bhikkhus who were not there in their practice. So they could hear from the masters. So you have also this set of questions showing up between another interesting couple. That is between Visakha and his once upon a time wife, who was now Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna, and she was an arahant. Visakha was an anagami. So he has these questions, pretty much almost all of them, asking of his once upon a time wife, who's now a bhikkhuni, who's an arahant. So this set of questions, it's not like once recurring or once happening. It is reoccurring in different places in the Nikayas. So that's an indication that it is absolutely true that these things happen, because in the Dhamma, if you see something only once, it's very fishy, as they say, very dubious that it might have been added later. But if you have several, like Lord Buddha says, the Dhamma's flavor is one, salty, like salty sea. It needs to have suffering and it needs to have nirodha. Those two have to be there. And you see that in this set of questions. But why, Bhante, are the in and out breathing considered to be bodily sankharas? Again, not like he doesn't know the answer. He's asking for our sake and for the sake of all those who are sitting listening. Why are thinking and pondering considered to be verbal sankharas? And why are perceiving and feeling considered to be mental sankharas? Householder, the in and out breathing takes place because of the presence of a body. If you have a body, you're going to breathe. They are bound with and to the body. If you have a body, you're going to breathe. If you need to keep having a body, you need to breathe somehow. Therefore, the in and out breathing are considered to be the bodily sankharas. Bhante Nyanananda describes this beautifully. And he uses the example of activity that we do. Let's say you want to lean over and move that chair. What do you do? Before moving? Or something a little bit more obvious, more loud. How about if you're going to lift some heavy weights? If you're at the gym and you're going to carry some dumbbells, some barbells with heavy, heavy loads, what do you do first? You lean down and you do what? You what? Yes, you breathe how? You breathe in, yes, first. And as you're lifting it, and then you're really exerting energy, you go. That's why Bhante Nyananda calls it preparation instead of formation, instead of energizing activities or habitual tendencies like I call it, because you're preparing Preparing what? You're preparing the body. In fact, if you don't prepare the body, what happens? Ever heard of hernia?
What's the term used for in and out breathing in Pali?
Oh, well, we just use the anapana. That's it, anapana. But when we do the anapanasati sutta, Lord Buddha uses a future tense to describe. But the simplistic version, there's different ways of saying it. But usually what we use is anapana. That's it. Now motion is being prepared, therefore, by the breath. Always. Imagine, if you're leaning forward, what do you do? If you're changing your posture, what do? You have to move the lungs in and out in the process we call breathing. The most perfect example is if you've ever gone underwater, if you've ever tried scuba diving. One of the worst things you could do is hold your breath, because you will die if you hold your breath, especially if you're going in deeper, into deeper pressure areas, or coming out as you're holding your breath. That's really dangerous. So when you're getting your instructions, years ago when I was getting certified as a scuba diver, they said, don't hold your breath as you're coming up. Your lungs will pop. You will destroy your lungs. Because as you're coming up, the pressure around your lungs, which is squeezing your lungs into smaller size, because there's a lack of pressure outside, now you will have more expansion of the lungs. And if you keep holding your breath in, explodes. So motion necessitates breathing. Breathing is life. Some meditation teachers, if they really want to nudge you, shake you, they will ask you, why do you breathe? Once you run out of excuses, they're still going to ask you, why? 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 Until you get to the bottom. And then you see there's craving. There's tanha at the bottom. Tanha. And craving for what? For life. Craving. I want some more. I want one more day. I want one more minute, please. One more minute to live. That's what life is. A series of, please, can I have one more minute? Please? You go ahead to any hospital room, any ICU, any person who's on the verge of death. You look at their face, you look in their eyes, and what do you see? One more minute, please. One more hour, please. Please, I'll give you anything. Just one more minute. What is that? Tanha. And what is tanha coming from? Avijja. Definitely puts another spin on this thing called paticca samuppada that you keep hearing about, doesn't it? Next time you breathe in and out, look at that. Look at it through that lens, the paticca samuppada, instead of listing the links, which is absolutely useless if you cannot connect it to your real life experiences. That's Dhamma. That's when you are actually getting closer to the Dhamma. Because it's not just intellectual. So you have the breath, in and out. Further, householder, prior to speaking, someone first thinks and ponders. Try it next time you speak. You have to have some processing going on before you open your mouth. Otherwise, it's like gibberish. Even gibberish has to be planned. How you do it, where you do it, let alone when you're projecting some coherent ideas. And that's what you hopefully are conveying through your words. But how could you do it? You first have to prepare it, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and most puthujjanas do it unknowingly. That's why we call it sankhara, habitually being done. I challenge you. See if you can, 5 minutes, forget it 5 minutes, 5 seconds. Maybe 5 seconds would be even too much. How about 1 second? Even during this talk today, see if you can monitor the conversation in your head. The chit-chat that's ongoing all the time. Make it louder, enough so that you can hear it. Well, if you can, that's when you are encountering the vachi sankhara. Sankhara, the verbal sankharas. So verbal sankharas come out of thinking and pondering, vitakka and vichara. Thinking could be just anything, you're thinking thoughts. But pondering is the really more heavy, cement legs, I call it. Like your legs have been dipped into barrels of cement and the cement has dried. You're dragging yourself. That's pondering. It becomes heavy. That's why you cannot go beyond. If you're able to go into the jhanas, second jhana is not going to come around because you're still holding on to vitakka vichara, which is called, another way of saying, subvocal speech. Thinking and pondering, think of it as subvocal. You can't hear it. You can't hear it. Until the person's either almost half conscious, like a person who's drunk. They have no control over their speech. I've heard some drunk people say in the past, you know, I thought I was actually saying something that was coherent, and I thought I was going to say a sentence properly while I was drunk, but the moment I opened my mouth, all came out was totally incoherent words. Meanwhile, they're thinking, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this. There's a breakup. There's a breakup. The person is no longer functioning in a balanced way. But most puthujjanas are not functioning on a balanced way anyhow. Check yourself next time. When you do something that you're not so pleased about, you feel some regret at the end. Like, why did I say that? Why do I think that should be the first question? Because before you said it, you thought it. When we were children, we would say a lot of things and my parents would scold us, punish us for having said something that was wrong, not at the right time. Think before you speak. Is that familiar? In every culture. But how many times do we actually keep up to that, even when we are really old? Barely. Hence, you understand why Lord Buddha was emphasizing the need for sati and sampajanya. Sati has to be there. For what? So you can at least see what's going on. You're preparing to release the demons out of your mouth. You're preparing to release the craziness out of your mouth. The craziness that you tolerate, the thinking, now you're about to unleash it into the world. That's why we also practice sila. So we restrain ourselves from being so stupid, so heartless, so mean with our speech. Similarly with our bodies. If somebody could just breathe properly before they do something with their body, let's say you're about to kill something, instead of automatically reaching for that, I don't know, slippers to hit that spider, to kill it, that's all sankhara. But you're doing it habitually. You can pause. You can apply sati sappajani, which is what an arahant does. As you're reaching for the slippers, you just go, wait, why? Why was I going to do that? So you took yourself out of automatic pilot. You're now playing an active role in your life. An arahant is a person who plays an active role in their life, not a passenger. Not a passive role. Most of us are passive participants in our lives. That's why we suffer, that's why we are caught and stuck in samsara. We're never going to get out unless we play an active role in changing our relationship to action, be it bodily action, verbal action, and we're going to see mental action in a second. So someone first thinks and ponders subvocally, and only after having done so one breaks into words. Therefore, thinking and pondering are verbal sankharas. Meanwhile, perceiving and feeling are both mental processes and are bound with and to the mind. Therefore, perceptions and feelings are mental sankharas. Sadhu Bhante, replied Chitta, delighting in the response given by the Venerable Kamabhu, as he continued. In therapy, for many years I used to have to explain to fellow therapists how feelings as such, or emotions as we use in Western psychology and mental health, before they become emotions or feelings, they are actually thoughts. Many years ago, cognitive psychology became such a big deal. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, still is in the world. People go get certified in them. They show off their certificates in the, like I have this, I have CBT, yes, CBT training, yes. Insurance companies that pay for mental health sessions will like you to be certified in that because they are known as the quick or brief therapy. This is what we do over there too. But many, many problems began showing up when we look at things in a cognitive sense, in the absence of other aspects of the human experience and translating as to what it is. Earlier I was mentioning how Pali words have to be looked contextually. Well, if the word has to be looked at contextually, how about the mind? Cognition is only one portion of the mind, of the experience. You can't just cognitively understand something and say, yes, I'm good to go. No, it is only short-lived. You have to support it with augment it and support it with other aspect of understanding beyond the cognitive. So feelings have to be also taken into understanding, into appreciation, proper appreciation. How did it start? Sanya, oftentimes, even in this translation, I use perception. However, it's more than that. Memories are also sanya, Memories. Glimmers of ideas, images that come to mind, brief, very brief, before they turn into thinking as such. Sometimes meditation students come and say, Bhante, I had these thoughts, these images come to mind, should I fight them? I say, no. Did you actually sit down and think about them? They say, no, but they just popped into my head. That's okay. You've had countless eons of lifetimes, beginningless lifetimes, where you thought habitually in a certain direction. That doesn't stop, You can't tell a Niagara to stop halfway. A powerful river, you can't make it stop. Just like, okay, you stop there. There's a momentum behind it. Well, your thoughts are more powerful than any Niagara in the cosmos. And they're going to come. Now, what you do with it, that is the distinguishing factor. That indicates if there's wisdom or not. So that's when it becomes a sankhara. Because these things will keep coming. Keep coming. They're not going to stop. What you do with it, that's the problem, or that's the solution. So in the case of a putujjana, they keep fighting with their memories, especially in meditation. And that's why many people go into the suppression mode. Suppression will never get you to any panya. You might even get to the 8th jhana. Many people do. But then they come out of the jhana and you know, they let their guard down, and then all of a sudden you see that they're still the same ugly person inside. Again, despite the fact that they reached the 8th jhana. What was that all about? Why is it so special then, a jhana, if you're still breaking precepts, if you're still not a decent person to be friends with? Because they were suppressing what? The sankharas. That's why many of these 10-day retreats, the silent retreats that go on around the world, they're completely unsuccessful. So long as they continue on this path and not look properly at why am I not gaining panya. Panya has to be there. Unfortunately, the suppressive quality of one's actions to push down the sankharas, it's like trying to close the lid on a volcano that is active. Well, it's either you or the volcano, and volcano is going to win. Because you have countless lifetimes behind you of a momentum that has started from beginningless time. Lord Buddha tried that for 6.5 years. That's why he was unhappy having reached the 8th jhana. He said, but I still am breaking. That's the distinguishing factor of Siddhartha Gautama from all the others. Because they were worshipping, I'm able to reach the 8th jhana, yes, yes. But Lord Buddha said, but you haven't changed. I haven't changed. I still have the kileshas in my heart. The defilements are there. Who cares if I can sit in the jhana for this many days or whatever? I feel blissed out. Who cares? In India, you still have that tradition for thousands of years to this day. And these people become holy, gurus, rishis, this and that. Not just in India, of course. In Buddhism, we have that. In Dhamma, we have that, people who have never penetrated. But we worship this blindly because we don't understand this teaching. We never look at this. How many people have actually heard of Dutiya Kamabhu Sutta? Or Chu Kai Yee Sutta? It's there. It's there for the looking, for the finding, for the practicing. But how, Bhante, is the cessation of perceptions and feelings attained? Now he goes into the actual attainment. It was already available, as I was saying, the 8 rungs of the jhanas. They were available at the time of the Buddha. Siddhartha Gautama, as I mentioned, he did all of the jhanas. To this day, it's still going on. You have it also in Burma, Myanmar. We have it in Thailand, in Sri Lanka, other places. Those are the typical 8 jhanas. But what distinguished Lord Buddha and his teachings from everything else was that he showed an alternative path. Because nobody following those 8 rungs of the jhanas was able to become an arahant. They were stuck in the Neva Sanyana Sanyas realm, which is neither perception nor non-perception, which doesn't give you panya, which doesn't give you liberation. You're stuck. In fact, you're stuck for about 84,000 Mahakalpas. Last time I think I mentioned to you, calculated how much it is. 84,000. It's mind-boggling. There was one person I think I heard about who calculated by putting zeros, regular size, 12 size font I think, and how far of a distance would this Mahakalpa have? I think it came out to several miles. Just the numbers, if you put down 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 12 size font on a piece of paper, that paper has to be stretched by a few miles, and that's only one Mahakalpa. How old are you again? I'm 52. That's like 52. That's like this much space. Imagine. But you're stuck. What Lord Buddha discovered, the path, and he shared with us, is this: cessation of perceptions and feeling. This was unprecedented. It did not exist. And only a Buddha, a Lord Buddha, can teach this, can reveal this. And his students can practice this. Only. That's why if you want liberation, don't go looking for somewhere else. And probably I'm the only bhikkhu who says this, because in this world of integration and yes, everybody's equal kind of a business nonsense, has no place in the Dhamma. I say it like it is. There's no liberation outside of this sasana, period. Don't try looking for it. And when I say this sasana, I mean this teaching that we find coming from the Pali canon. Not Mahayana, not Vajrayana, not nowhere else. That's not coming from me. It's coming from the teachings. We have to say it like it is. And not be afraid of it. Not be afraid of it. Cessation of perception and feeling allows the person to cut loose. In fact, it is the closest thing to the actual Nibbana experience of an Arahant. It's not Nirodha Samapatti. Some people have claimed it. It's not. That one is called Nirodha Samapatti, which is full awakening. That is an Arahant, full-fledged Arahant. But before I go further into this, let's jump back in. So now he's asking Bhante, what is the cessation of perception and feeling? Again, this is not outside Chitta's domain of understanding. He knows this. Because remember, he was what? Anagami. So this was his domain. He is able to go into this state. Householder, it does not occur in a way where the bhikkhu who attains to the cessation of perceptions as feeling would reflect to himself thus. So this is not the way it works, he says, where the bhikkhu says to himself, I am about to attain to the cessation of perception and feeling. Or, I'm now attaining to the cessation of perceptions and feeling. Or, nor, I have attained, now I'm inside of it, in that state, now I have attained to the cessation of perception and feeling. He says it doesn't work like that. Rather, his mind has already been developed in such a manner that it naturally unfolds into and opens up to that state. Unfolds into and opens up into that state. I didn't want to use just enters into that state because many translators might use that. I don't like that term. Unfolds. There's a difference in texture, in the different way of relating to that experience. Opening up Oftentimes I describe to students how moving through the jhanas, even if the first jhana has not been attained, the best way to do is to keep this posture in the mind, in your attitude. Just open and be available. Before you serve a meal at your dinner table, all your plates are available. The bowl of soup that you're going to have, before you put the soup in, the bowl is completely available. If it weren't, you can't fill it up with soup, can you? Unfortunately, most of us do what when we sit to meditate? We sit with a full bowl of soup and expect to have a new bowl of soup coming in. It doesn't work. It's full. Empty it out. Relax. Don't bring in yesterday's scenario saying, well, I was able to sit down and I was able to get into the first or second or whatever jhana, or at least I had a wonderful, amazing sit yesterday, Bhante. How come today I can't? Your bowl is full. Empty it. Every time you sit, have a beginner's mind. Beginner's attitude. I don't know anything. Can you say that to yourself? It's okay. I might have been, you can even say, I might have been fortunate, lucky, this and that, to get into that state of calm. Fine, fine. And I'm going to let things happen as they may. I'm simply going to make myself what? Available. Now, as you do that, the mind becomes more and more settled, settled, settled. And then it slowly slides into the first jhana. Now you get into the second jhana, and then you're like, okay, now I have to get into the second jhana. That's my marker. That's my record. No, the bowl is still full, empty. Yeah, but I have a legacy here. I've done a lot of meditation. Come on. I have a resume here of many jhanas. Come on, I've done so many retreats. Come on, that must count for something. No, it counts for 0. Because you're too occupied. Empty, empty. Slowly, slowly, as you do this, you become so acclimated, relaxed. It's like, yeah, I know the drill. I know. Also in the case of athleticism, if you've ever played some sport, if you play some tennis, football, or I don't know, golf, swimming, cooking, anything, where it might seem that that action that you're engaged in is really demanding, difficult for someone else, but it's not for you. They look at you with amazement. How do you do this? I used to watch my grandmother or mother cut the onions, and I was like, they're so close. Like, how come she's not cutting her off her fingers? Or especially peeling apples. That was such a difficult task. Or cutting open oranges. I would watch intently my mother, how she would do it. And finally, I was able to do it one time with the apples. Years later, like as a teenager in high school, I was like, yes, I did it. But I was no longer lost in like, okay, I have to hold the knife like this. I was not fixated. I was not so tight, tense. The bowl was no longer full. I was just allowing the knife to flow. Trustingly, although I had done it many, many, many times. But now I was letting it go and just let the pieces fall where they may type of attitude. So here you have the mind just allowed. So therefore, the next question would be, well, the cessation of perception and feeling then, it doesn't happen suddenly? Like, I've never done any jhanas, never got into one. I can't just jump into cessation. No, you can't. It's a gradual process. That's why the mind has to be trained slowly, carefully, patiently. as you're doing this, what happens is you're doing, I wouldn't say brain surgery, but you're definitely doing mental surgery. What I mean by that is you're becoming more and more intimate how your mind works. All the tricks that you play on yourself become exposed. All the sneaky, sneaky, sneaky things you do that no one knows about, but you do, if you're really honest, they show up. You catch on, you discover them. That means you are developing more insight, more panya developing inside of you. And you start seeing that, secretly underneath it all, there's this foggy presence of papanchas. Papanchas are the mental proliferations, the constant humming presence of multiplication of ideas. They constantly are there. They're doing the show, they're running the show. They are the essence of the sankharas, you can say. Because we go with them, we believe them. But in this case, they have stopped. It happens gradually, but it stops. That's why the person is now into the cessation of perceptions and feelings. But it does it gradually. It does it gradually. Like today you're here, right? In this room, in this hall. Did you start the day here? Did you just show up suddenly? Did you bilocate? No, you started from your home. Then you took some steps. You came outside your home. You took some more steps. You got closer and closer and closer. Eventually you ended up where? In the building. Are you still here? No, you're not. You're still in the building, but not here. You have to take more steps. More steps. So similarly, you are creating the conditions for the mind to come to a restful stop. And that is what cessation of perceptions and feelings is. That's why it's not going to happen suddenly. The person has to go through it stage by stage through the jhanas. Because each one of these are nice stations. So Chitta says, Sadhu Bhante, replied Chitta in delightful agreement as he continued on. But Bhante, as the bhikkhu is attaining to the cessation of perceptions and feelings, if you notice, he says the bhikkhu, out of respect. You can tell that he was probably the only layperson there, because everyone else around Venerable Kamabhu were monks. Even though he himself, Chitta, is not a monk, but he's able to attain to that state. So he says, as the bhikkhu is attaining to the cessation of perceptions and feelings, what ceases first? When I first read this years ago, I was like, oh, okay, we're getting to the techniques. Yes, we're gonna do this. Which ceases first? The bodily sankharas, the verbal sankharas, or the mental sankharas? Which one stops? These questions, we have to understand, again, show up in the conversation between Dhammadinna and Visakha, Venerable Dhammadinna and Visakha. And then we also have it between the conversation with Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahakotitha. And now we have it here with Chitta and Venerable Kamabhu. It's pretty interesting, and it's interesting how all these three individuals in three different suttas answer the same way. First this happens, then this, and then that. It's so methodical. It's not like, well, it could be like this. We live in an age where a lot of could-bes, and it sickens me to my gut when I hear sometimes Dhamma talks where I can't find the voice of the speaker. Meaning, not like their voice is gone, but what are they saying? People are afraid to have a spine. The Dhamma requires a spine, you know, a backbone to stand up, not on my words, but on the words of Lord Buddha. The experience of the Arahants for all these years, centuries, it's intact. So the system has to stay intact. It's not wishy-washy. Buddhism is the same as Christianity. I hear that sometimes. I've heard that from a Maha, an Ajahn. My jaw dropped. Like, what kind of a Maha is this? What is this? And you have thousands of followers. You have another person, another Theravada, very well-known monk, another Ajahn in the West, comparing bodhisattvas to arahants. And then at the end, you don't even know what he's saying. What is this? I can't even grasp what you're saying because it's so fake. It's adhamma. That's the culture we're living in today. People are afraid. People are afraid to have a courage to say what is Dhamma from what is adhamma, and it is majority of the time, sadly, adhamma. Even if it's coming from a robed person. That's why you must know these suttas for yourselves and really understand what Lord Buddha and his Arya Savakas are saying, unafraid. If you want the sasana not to die in this century, you must stand up. It will die. The teachings are disappearing. In this century, they will be wiped out if we don't do something, at least in our own practice. Having the suttas in books and websites means nothing if you don't know how to carry that with you into the marketplace, into your business, into your world. And not be afraid. Here, the same questions are being asked and the same way are being answered in different places in India, in different times probably decades apart. Householder, as the bhikkhu is attaining to the cessation of perceptions and feelings, the verbal sankharas are the ones to cease first. Verbal sankharas are what again? Chit-chat in the brain, right? Thinking and pondering. All these, another way I like to use, instead of sometimes, depending on where it is, what I'm saying in the translation, instead of pondering, we can all relate to planning. Go to any bus stop, probe, let's say, if you have the tools to go into someone's brain, you will see that they're constantly engaged in some form of planning. What are we going to have tonight for dinner? What are we going to do this? Next week, what am I going to say? How am I going to respond to this email? Oh, I'm going to give it to her. I'm going to say this. Da, 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 da. What is this? Planning. All the time. Many people come to Dhamma talks and sometimes, many times, you might not agree with what the speaker is saying. You say, oh yeah, that's not right. You already like, this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to attack in this way. What is that? The doors are closed. There's no Dhamma coming in, definitely. And you're preparing for a rebuttal. You're planning. That cannot be there if you are entering into the cessation of perceptions and feelings. That's what Venerable Kamabhu is saying. First, the chit-chat in the brain stops. Stillness. No noise. Again, this doesn't come overnight. You need to have worked towards it from the first jhana and on. Because the mind is used to that. Because sometimes people get afraid when they get to that mental stillness. When you have that much quiet, it becomes like eerie. It becomes, this is not right. Well, how come there's no noise? It's too quiet, I've heard some people say. You become startled. For such a person, they're so comfortable in it, it's like, oh, I'm back home. This is home for me, they say. They rest in it. So the verbal sankharas are the ones to cease first. Then the bodily sankharas. What were the bodily sankharas? In and out breathing. That stops. So a person who's going into the cessation of perception and feeling, the breathing stops. To such a point where it's not necessarily completely like, it's very long, it's undetectable. If you put your hand on their chest or something to feel if the heart or the chest is expanding, you won't be able to. You need to have a time-lapse photography or something to put the camera on them and have measuring devices to see if there's actually expansion. That's how slow they move, the lungs. Because they also have to have heat, which we'll see in a second. And then, excuse me, and then finally, the mental sankharas are the ones to cease last. Mental sankharas are, as we said, what? Perceptions and feelings in this case, right? So it's the last, the feelings part. Again, where do feelings come from? Ideas. Perceptions, again, memories don't even show up, they don't even occur. Because you're not watering it with chit-chat, with papanchas. You're not engaged. That's why when we sit to meditate, most of the time, what are we doing? We are watering the papanchas. People come to sit so that they can plan, so that they can redecorate their home, so that they can plan a new path to go home, to have a better lunch menu, I don't know. That's not meditation. Sadhu Bhante, he says, replied Chitta as he approved with delight and asked further, Bhante, is there a difference between a dead person and a bhikkhu? Legitimate question. If he's not moving, he's sitting there. So, and the bhikkhu who has attained to the cessation of perceptions and feelings. So, because it's a suspended, think of it as a suspended animation. Over the course of time in India, because this had become such a common phenomenon between Lord Buddha's Arya Savakas, where, you know, the same bhikkhu who would be there and the Pindapada suddenly doesn't show up for a few days, a week. So the people who would be serving him would turn to their students and say, where is your teacher? Where is our teacher? We miss him. We need to give him food. And they say, oh, you can't see him because he is in this attainment. No one can disturb him. And sometimes people are obviously eager. They would go and snoop around to look. And sometimes they're not going to be doing it in a kuti. They would do it in the jungle, especially if they were forest-dwelling monks. So, at the time of Lord Buddha Kakusanda in a different eon, one of his chief disciples, Venerable Sanjiva, or Sanjiva actually, he was entering into this state in the forest. It was he was in the forest, in the jungle, and he went into this state. Sanya Vedaita Nirodha Samapatti. Now, some people came in to celebrate something from the village, and apparently they were sitting there for a long time. And he was sitting there for a long time, and they noticed that there were some leaves and things on his robes. And they thought, oh, this yogi must have died while meditating, because they're making all this ruckus and all this noise, and he's not moving. He should have moved. If you're a living organism, you must have moved, and he didn't move. And they say, oh, this venerable one has died, but there's nobody here to cremate him. let's cremate him. So they gather some wood, pile it on top of him, light it up. He didn't die. In fact, not even the edges of his robes were singed. Nothing. That's one of the other benefits of a person who goes into this state. Among the other benefits, the mundane benefit is that no wild animal, nothing harmful could ever touch you while you're in this state. Nothing could happen to you. The whole universe could collapse. The earth could split open. You will sit there untouched. Just like this bhikkhu was sitting there untouched. It was that day where he had to come up, and usually it's, not usually, at the most they say it's 7 days you can sit in this, because the body needs nutrition. And plus your body has to go, you know, you have to answer the call of nature. Even if you're sitting in meditation, doesn't mean that you're, you know, liquids and all that, the kidneys are working. Still, even though at a very low level, basic function is there. So you have to go. So 7 days is what they say is the longest. So apparently this Venerable Anu did not have a plaque in front of him, because sometimes it's advised to put some type of a writing in front of you when you're sitting for that long, to say, I am entering meditation, deep meditation, please don't bother me. I will come out, I'm not dead, please don't cremate me. Nor call the police, nor call the ambulance, paramedics, leave me alone. I promise I will come out of this state. So Venerable Sanjiva did not have that plaque in front of him, and they try to cremate him. Now, he's hungry, he comes out and he sees he's all covered in ash. So he shakes his robes, and without missing a beat, as they say, he picks his bowl and he goes to the village for alms, because he's hungry. He goes to the village, and some of the people who tried to cremate him see him. And they say, oh, Bhante, he's out, he's up, he's out. Like, oh, you're a miracle, this is magic, this is this. That's how he gets the name Sanjiva, which means the one who lives. So I just felt like bringing that example in. Again, this is a jhanic state. This is the highest jhanic state. Again, the distinguishing factor as far as the Buddhist path is concerned, and in reference to the jhanas, is that it offers you this potential. This other branch of the jhanas, which takes you, has the potential for you to experience the closest thing to actual Nibbana. Now, only two kinds of people can attain to this stage: an anagami and an arahant. No one below these two levels. We get this from the suttas, from the Nikayas. I've met some teachers over the course of the years of meditating who claim that anyone can attain, and that I have not found any proof of that in the suttas. But they claim it, and they have many, many, many thousands of students gathered around them, believing that they have attained Sanya Vedaita Nirodha Samapatti. They haven't. Because at the very least, the person has to be an anagami to be able to attain this. Now, not every anagami can attain this either. But at the very least, the qualification has to be for the person to be an anagami. Why? Because they have dropped the 5 fetters. So so he asked, what's the difference between a dead person and a person who enters into this state? And this is Venerable Kamabhu's response. Householder, in the case of a dead person who has come to the end of life, the bodily sankharas have ceased completely. In the case of a what? A dead person. The bodily sankhara, there's no breathing. You cannot fake it. You cannot pump air into the lungs of a dead person and expect them to get up, right? So that has stopped and are subsided. The verbal sankharas have also ceased completely and are all subsided. So there's no thinking going on in the brain. It's dead. You put it into encephalogram, which is a brain wave reader, and you're not going to see any motion, any waves happening. The mental sankharas have also ceased completely and are now subsided. So there's no feeling. You poke them, this and that, no response. The living vitality, ayu, in Pali, and in ajur or ayur in Sanskrit, if you know anything about Indian medicinal system, Ayurveda, that's where it comes from. The living vitality, or ayu, has been exhausted by coming to a halt. So this is the dead person. That's it. The vital heat necessary for life to occur has been extinguished for a dead person. And the mental faculties have all dispersed. That means the aggregates are all dispersed, gone. However, householder, in the case of the bhikkhu, who has attained to the cessation of perceptions and feelings, the bodily sankharas have ceased completely. So that is common between the two. Breathing is stopped between a dead person and the person in this state, and are all subsided. The verbal sankharas have also ceased completely and are all subsided. The mental sankharas have all ceased completely and are now subsided. So all these are common between the two. But the living vitality, ayu, has not been exhausted nor come to a halt. The ayu, that factor, is still there. The vitality, the living vitality. But the living, nor come to a halt. The vital heat necessary for life to occur has not been extinguished. So if you go ahead and touch the person, even though they don't recommend that, the body is not cold. You can still feel the heat. Some heat. They're still alive. And the mental faculties, in fact, are now much clearer and refreshed if that person comes out. So it's not dull when they come out. Like a person who comes out of a coma, their mental faculty is very dull. This is the difference, householder, between a dead person and one who has attained the cessation of perceptions and feeling. Sadhu, sadhu, Bhante, replied Chitta, delighting in the response given by the Venerable Kamabhu, while continuing to ask further. And how, Bhante, does one emerge from the state of cessation of perceptions and feelings? How does one come out? We saw how they went in, right? Mental chit-chat stops, then the breathing, then the mental sankharas. So, but what's the process of coming out? Which one starts first, right? If you've ever seen a picture of a pilot turning on the ignition of a plane or a helicopter, they don't just hit a button and just like, okay, they go. If you've seen, they have many, many buttons to push, gadgets, levers, all these things, and there's an order to things. You can't just do haphazardly doing this. No, once you have to do this first, you have to do that second, etc., until the engine warms up, and then you can do. The body follows the same procedures, roughly. So, again, you can think of Chitta here is simply comparing notes, because he knows what happens. He experiences this. And in the Sangyutta Nikaya commentaries, it says how Chitta used to go in and out of this cessation of perceptions and feelings quite a lot. And he was a very wealthy businessman. So he could afford to just sit there in his, upper veranda, in his terrace, in his palace, just be in cessation. Business was going on, so he didn't have to worry about money. So he knew he wanted to go in and out a lot. So he was very knowledgeable, but he's like, he likes to, it sounds like, wanting to know, to kind of validate, Venerable Kamabhu, validate his experiences. Almost like, this is my experience, what's yours? Let me check it. Here, householder, in coming out of the cessation of perceptions and feelings, it does not happen in a way where the bhikkhu would reflect to himself, I'm about to emerge from the cessation of perceptions and feelings. Like I'm in it, okay, I'm about to come out of cessation. There's no such thing, he says. Or, I'm now emerging from the cessation of perception. I'm coming out of this state. There's no such thing. Nor, I have just emerged from the cessation of perceptions and feelings. Like, I'm coming out of it, almost like it's like, still, continuation of that. Basically, the awareness is there type of a hypothesis isn't there. The person cannot have that. That's why it's called the cessation of perceptions and feelings. There's no perception. Rather, his mind has already been developed in such a manner that it naturally emerges from that state. He trained his mind before going in that I will sit for this many hours, and this many minutes, and these many seconds. Sometimes people would do let's say 3 days, 4 hours, 57 minutes, and 34 seconds. You just say it to yourself and you leave it. I like to, when I encourage meditators to become better at controlling the mind, in a sense, to not rely on your alarm clock that much. Have it be there in the beginning to test it. Say to yourself, let's say you wake up at 6 a.m., let's say. Instead of saying, I'm going to wake up at 6, have some fun. Say, I'm going to wake up at 5:57 a.m., 46 seconds. And see. But say it very clearly before you go to bed. The seconds might be a little bit too much in the beginning. Let's say 5:59. You can even say it in a very cordial, loving way. Say, please wake me up at 5:59. Or, let's wake up at 5:59. But say it clearly. Say it with intention, say it with mindfulness, with sati, and drop it. The next morning, you might wake up at 5:59 or 6:01 if you didn't have an alarm. That's why I recommend having an alarm first. So it's wonderful when people discover so many things that they could do. You can narrow it down to even the seconds. So as you do this more and more, you can take that technique into the jhanas. If you're entering jhanas, able to go into a jhana saying, I'm going to stay in this jhana for 15 minutes and 36 seconds. Then you come out. So as you're going into higher and higher jhanas, like this one especially, what happens is that you are not telling your mind, okay, time to come out now. No, you can't do that. That's what he's saying. You can only do so if you have trained your mind so much that it already knows, before you go in, how many days or hours I'm going to stay in the cessation of sanya and vedayita. Make sense? So again, this cessation state is not nibbana. Please remember that. It is the closest experience to the nibbana experience, because what happens is, if the anagami has done enough work on himself or herself, and they're able to enter into this sanya vedayita nirodha samapatti state, if they have really worked enough and they're going in it and they have come out of it, there's a chance that they will either attain to the fruition stage of anagami or all of a sudden drop into arahantship. That's why it's the closest thing to the Nibbana experience. But not every anagami. Some commentators or scholars say that when the anagami goes into this stage and as they come out they attain arahantship, that is not true. That is not true. Because Chitta was not an arahant. And he used to go in and out, in and out, in and out. If he did go in, on his way out, he would become an arahant. And we don't know if he was an arahant. He did not die an arahant. He died an anagami, from what I've seen in the suttas. Sadhu Bhante, replied Chitta in delighted agreement, as he asked further. He's still curious. But Bhante, as the bhikkhu is coming out of the cessation of perceptions and feelings, what arises first? So now we go and make a full circle back to the sankharas. He started with the sankharas, he's closing with the sankharas. Is it the bodily sankharas, the verbal sankharas, or the mental sankharas, Bhante? Householder, as the bhikkhu is emerging from the cessation of perceptions and feelings, the mental sankharas are the ones to arise first. The mental. Which are what? Yes, feeling, perceptions. So those are the subtlest waves in the mind. Subtlest. Then the bodily sankharas. Because you need to prepare the mind for the chit-chat. The thinking and pondering, right? You need to prepare. And then the verbal sankharas are the ones to arise last and keep you company for the rest of your life. Did I leave the kitchen table this? Did I do this? Did I do this? Oh, constantly your mind is bombarded with thoughts and thoughts and thoughts. It's exhausting. Exhausting. Especially if other people or when other people dump their truckloads of thoughts onto you. Texting you, calling you, this and that. They're hurling their own thoughts and ideas and all the nonsense and junk going on in their mind onto you. That's why Lord Buddha always wanted to go away. Seclusion. And he always encourages the bhikkhus to be doing that. And that's why I'm so surprised at bhikkhus who leave seclusion and come to the cities. And sadly, around the world I'm discovering, especially in Asia, the dreadful, sad and miserable reality where you have monasteries being emptied out of bhikkhus, being abandoned by bhikkhus, being left unattended by bhikkhus who want the noise and clamor and prestige or the resources that the city life provides and everything else that comes along with it, which is Dhamma. These are my thoughts anyhow. I'm not going to make friends. Householder, as the bhikkhu is emerging from the cessation of perceptions and feelings, the mental sankharas are the ones to arise first, then the bodily sankharas, and then the verbal sankharas are the ones to arise last. Sadhu Bhante, replied Chitta, as he approved with delight while continuing. Notice he says approved. He's like, yeah, that's it. That's what my research has shown. That's what my experience has shown, he's saying. Bhante, what are the types of contact that touch the bhikkhu who emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings? If you ever wake up, in the morning when you wake up, check your attitude. Check what is the first thing that you want to do. Many of us reach for the phone. Did I get an email? Did I get an email? Did I get a response? Or I don't know, if you live close to the beach or some scenery or something, or is it raining? You look outside the window perhaps? Or do you rush to the fridge, the refrigerator, to drink something, orange juice or something? What is the first action? What is the first compelling contact Contact, we never pay attention to contact. That's where the big show is. That's where the attention goes. That tells me everything about the meditator, where they are. Is it yoniso manasikara or ayoniso manasikara? Is it the right kind of attention being given or the wrong? So in this case, he's asking, where does the attention go for this bhikkhu who just came out of cessation, Bhante? So he says, householder, there are 3 types of contact that touch the bhikkhu who emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings. These are the perception of emptiness, the perception of the signless, and the perception of the undirected, which touch the bhikkhu who emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings. These are 3 different ways of describing the same thing, basically. Nibbana. The mind leans towards Nibbana, he's saying. Everywhere they look, they're looking for Nibbana. Even if they haven't attained it, if it's an anagami, the attention, the heart is leaning in that direction. They're not going to go and say, I wonder how my investments are doing in the stock market. They're not going to do that. They're not going to say, let me go check on the kids. They're not going to do that. The mind is understanding finally why it is here, why occupying this body. The urgency is so compelling. I keep repeating to listeners, to students, whether private or collection or online or person, always, always, always have this criterion in mind whenever you listen to anyone claiming to be giving you a Dhamma talk. I don't care who they are, where they're coming from, whether seemingly reputable or irreputable. Always check to see if there is urgency in their message. Samvega, for you to practice with all intensity. If it is missing, leave, run. The Dhamma cannot be Dhamma without Samvega. And in this world today, there is Samvega missing. There's a lot of action around tradition, rites and rituals, lineage holding, teacher worship, worshipping of the robe, a certain type of robe, certain type of temple, certain type of this. All this nonsense has nothing to do with the ultimate essence of the Dhamma, which is Samvega. Imagine your hair is on fire. That is Samvega. What do you do when your hair is on fire? Do you sit and debate? Do you do rites and rituals? Do you do teacher worship? Do you bow to the Buddha when your hair is on fire? You don't do any of those things. You take care of business. That is Samvega. The Dhamma must have that. Forget about tradition. All these nationalistic traditions and all this nonsense that was added. You see this all around Asia. You see this in Thailand, you see this in Sri Lanka, you see this in Burma. It's suffocating the Dhamma, killing the Dhamma. People are leaving the temples. Monks are disrobing whoever has honor. They're disrobing, they're saying, I don't have it. It's like, what is this? And people, on the other hand, who are coming in from the West, they're worshiping this teacher, that teacher, without understanding what the Dhamma is. We don't have those genuine, hardcore teachers anymore who push for the Samvega to arise in a person's heart. That's the only thing that's going to cut you from samsara, not worshiping me, this Bhante, this Ajahn, this Sayadaw. None of it. They have done, if they really, the Sayadaw, the Bhante, the Ajahn, if they really have become Arahants, good for them. They've done their work. Their own work is complete. What about you? They had Samvega. Do you have it? If you don't have it, then that's not the Dhamma that you're practicing. It's just cultural mumbo jumbo. Absolute nonsense. At the most, you're just going to get some merits. Big deal. You're still going to end up in samsara, sooner or later. Do something. Lord Buddha didn't teach us to collect merits so we can be reborn in a heavenly realm. That's not the main message of Lord Buddha. That's for cowards. Any idiot can do that. But any talk to me about courage, that's this path. This path is based on courage. Lord Buddha was the most courageous person, period. And he taught his students, and if we are calling ourselves his students, we have to muster up the same level of courage, which starts from Samvega. Don't go hiding behind your teacher's robes. Like children, we used to run behind our mom's skirt when we got scared. People do that now. Oh, I am so-and-so, Ajahn's student. Who cares? I get emails, oh, so-and-so, Ajahn, so-and-so, Sayadaw was my teacher. Who cares? And why are you his student? What happened to Lord Buddha? Remember Gautama, Buddha? What happened to him? Is he outdated? Is that it? He doesn't have enough Facebook followers, YouTube followers? Everybody wants to be some celebrity Ajahns or monks or Bhante's student these days. Where is the Dhamma in that? It's a comical thing that we have developed and call ourselves Buddhists. It's a joke. Unless it has Samvega. Chitta had Samvega. That's why he was Chitta. He became Chitta. So remind yourselves of that. Sadhu, 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 Bhante, he says, exclaimed the householder Chitta, being delighted with the Venerable Kamabhu's response as he continued. Bhante, in what direction does the mind of the bhikkhu incline and lean towards as he emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings? So he's still asking. Okay, after that, the first contact, it is towards Nibbana, towards the signless, animitta we call it. But where does it lean to? What type of a lifestyle does it lean towards? Householder, the mind of the bhikkhu who emerges from the cessation of perceptions and feelings naturally inclines towards seclusion. You're not going to see him going to a party. You're not going to find him calling his friends and saying, hey, when are we going to have a get-together? Let's have a party, let's have a dinner party. He or she is not going to do that. Their mind naturally inclines towards seclusion, leans towards seclusion and slopes into seclusion. Sadhu, 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 Bhante, said Chitta, the householder, in joyful agreement as he continued. And what, Bhante, are the conditions that are of the most importance to the attainment of the cessation of perceptions and feelings? Listen to what Venerable Kamabhu responds as. So he's asking, what are the utmost important ingredients, necessary factors to get the person to this state? Now, householder, you are asking at the very end the question that you should have asked first. Nevertheless, I will explain it to you. Householder, two are the conditions that are of the utmost importance to the attainment of the cessation of perceptions and feelings: stability of mind and penetrative insight. Samadhi and penetrative insight, looking deeper. You can even use the word vipassana into this. Penetratingly looking at things, probing, using Dhamma Vichaya as I went over last week or 2 weeks ago in the Bojjhangas. Don't just take it at face value. Look, why do I do this? Ask yourself, why do I say these things? What was it that I just said in my head to myself? Am I beating myself up over this phone conversation I just had and hung up? Am I still dwelling on it? And why? And what am I dwelling on? What's the nature of that? Why did I say this with this? Why did I interact this way? That is curiosity. That means you are not taking your life for granted. You're not making excuses for yourself. And how many of us do that? Making excuses of our behavior. All of us. There's always a list of excuses. Well, I did this because he or she did this, or this is how I naturally behave. Thank you very much, end of story. No penetrative insight. So this teaches you maturity, and that's why the Dhamma teaches us how to be adults. That's why you have a lot of babies in this sasana. A lot of babies who go to pay pujas and do, offerings, and that's the end of the story. Never come to the temple anymore. That's it. Why? Is that it? The whole action is happening in your life all the time. Why deprive yourself from the joy that you could get every time you penetrate with insight? Every aspect of your life is a big treasure trove of possibilities, of understanding, of panya. So when Lord Buddha is secluded, doesn't mean that he's bored. They know how to choose, They didn't choose to go away from a rich royal life of all kinds of distractions and pleasures and this and that in order for them to get a boring life, monotonous life in the jungle. When you look at it from the outside, it might look like that, but it's not. They're watching the mind. There's so much going on in there. All the stuff we tell ourselves, we do to ourselves. Nothing escapes your eyes. If you are able to penetrate them, that is. This is where the sutta ends. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So I hope it was an inspiring sutta for you as it has been for me. Any thoughts, questions, which I will try to answer?
The papancha that we had, and then now you are saying penetrative insight. What's the difference? And Dhamma Vichaya. You see? Because it always comes into the mind so many things. You say planning thing. But we also investigate the Dhamma. Like when you are alone, you do this. Just now the guy say like this. Oh, I shouldn't react. This is happening to me this morning too. So, but I'm also related all to the Dhamma. So is this considered papancha?
Finish your question.
So
That's
now
it?
I was just saying you are looking towards the last, we are talking penetrative insight. You must have samadhi and penetrative insight in order for you to attain the cessation. So what is the difference? You see, Dhamma Vichaya, we are also talking investigation of the Dhamma.
Agitation in the mind. Anytime you have papanchas, anytime, that is their telltale sign. How do you know if there's fire? The first indication, if you don't see fire with your eyes. Scorching wood, something, paint burning. That could work for you every time you notice there is agitation in the mind. Now, you cannot experience the finer states of mental development or the jhanas, especially this one, if the mind is agitated. It's impossible. It doesn't work. And no, we cannot use the Dhamma Vichaya card. Say, well, I'm doing the Dhamma Vichaya, so I'm trying to probe, and so that should be excusable. Well, there's a place for that. You're not going to do that while you're in a jhana, okay? That is the calm portion. You need to develop the samadhi. So a good teacher will allow you to, or show you how to go into the samadhi. Stay in it. Just like I said with the time. You put a time there. Say, once I get into this jhana, I will stay in it, let's say, for 1 hour. And then come out. Now the mind is so prepared. So prepared. The bowl is empty. For what? Because the thoughts are coming in. Not papanchas. The thoughts, remember, sankharas are coming in. You haven't turned them into papanchas. Because papanchas require your contribution. You have to be getting your hands dirty with them. Think of them as muddy, dirty, nasty things, papanchas. If you don't touch it, what's going to happen? Are you going to get dirty? Exactly, because you prepared the mind and you see these sannyas are going to come. Memories, images, thoughts, but you will not allow yourself to get entangled. Another way of looking at papanchas is entanglement. Becoming entangled with papanchas. You're too lost in them because there's no way that you stay only on the surface of papanchas. They are designed to pull you down. It's like a whirlpool in the ocean. You swim towards the whirlpool, depending on how strong it is, it will pull you down and drown you. And that's what happens. There was a Venerable Sangharakkhita years ago at the time of Lord Buddha, and he had a nephew who also, inspired by his uncle, became a bhikkhu. So one day he gets 2 sets of robes, the young bhikkhu, and he goes and to his uncle, Sangharakkhita, and he says, Bhante, uncle, I would like you to have this set of robes. And he says, no, I'm okay with my old robes. I'm fine, thank you, but no thanks. He says, no, Bhante, this is good, this is good, this is good. He says, I'm fine, thank you, keep it. Meanwhile, it's too hot outside. So out of respect for his uncle, you have to excuse me, I have a cough drop in my mouth, so I don't recommend giving a Dhamma talk while having something in my mouth. It's inappropriate. However, in this case, it's for medicinal purposes. So I hope, I wanted to say that. So now, out of respect to his uncle, he's fanning because they didn't have air conditioning. He's like, can you believe this? I'm bringing my extra robe for my uncle and he's saying no. Come on, but he's not, his uncle said no, twice already, enough. In his mind he says, you know what, this is just too much. This monk life is too much. Let me just go and become disrobed. Just disrobe. I'll go find myself a good girl somewhere in the village, get married, we'll have a baby. And out of respect, he's my uncle, I'm his nephew, I'll work and I'll buy, work in the farm, buy a cart with an ox, and I'll take my wife and the newborn baby to my uncle. I'll bring him over to the temple. So that way, yeah, I'll do that. Oh, he says, on the way, I will make sure that my wife holds the baby well, but she dropped it, and then the baby fell on the ground, and the wheels took care, the baby's dead, and I hit, he reaches over and he smacks in his mind, his wife. But what he's doing, smacking the head of, is using the fan to smack the head of his uncle. And that is traditionally what is given as an example for the papanchas. That's how powerful they are. Because it completely pulls you in. So you're not going to be on just the superficial level of papanchas. Sooner than later, you will be sucked into the quicksand. So, my suggestion is this. Keep an eye out on the agitation of the mind, because if there is wisdom, and guess what? The Dhamma Vichaya will bring you wisdom. Because even if there's too much Dhamma Vichaya, remember, it is the energizing group from the Bojjhangas, too much. Dhamma Vichaya, if it is really coming from Dhamma Vichaya, meaning wise, it will say, hey, you're investigating too much. Chill out, relax. Let's go into Pasadhi land. Let's go into Samadhi. Okay. That you are practicing the Dhamma. Now what happens sometimes, people convince themselves wrongly that they are practicing wisdom or insight. Okay? And you see them in meditation doing this. You see the lines, frowns, lines this way, vertical, lines horizontally, so you can do like, tic-tac-toe or whatever. There's no way they're experiencing Dhamma. There's no way they're going to have any kind of insights. Why? Because of insights occur when the ground is prepared. That is my proof. Does that sound convincing for you? Okay. Any other? Yes.
As a meditator myself, I find the more I listen to Dhamma talks, the more confused I get. Number one. And the second point is, if we understand the last words of the Buddha, he says very clearly that it is the Dhamma Vinaya which is the teacher and the guide. And you be an island or a light upon yourself to seek clarity from within. So that introspection and the courage which you mentioned is lacking in us. We do not have the ability to be independent and free from influences.
Okay.
That's what I see. Thank you.
So that's a comment, but I appreciate your comment, but I didn't see a question for me to answer.
The question is on the verse Dhammapada 183. We are putting so much emphasis on the first two verses, but we forget that most important one is actually the third verse, which is Sacitta Pariodapanang, to purify one's own mind. But we are more interested in looking at good and bad, evil, and stuff like that.
Well, I can say a few words in those in that line. Thinking in terms of good and bad eventually will become a hindrance. And in fact, if you're still attached to that, this is, I have to be good versus bad, I have to be good, not like them, which is also mana, which is conceit, you're still stuck. In the Pachalayamana Sutta, Lord Buddha addresses a question by Venerable Mahamoggalana, who was not an arahant yet, who was struggling. He says, Bhante, is there a brief, concise, tight, pocket-size morsel of a teaching? I added pocket size. Something that you can take with you? Like something that encapsulates the whole entire Dhamma in a bite-sized portion that can take you straight to Nibbana? He says there is, to the delight of Venerable Mahamoggalana. He says, Sabbe Dhamma Nalang Abhinivesaya. Nothing is worth clinging to. There's nothing that is fit for you to be clung to, including the idea of I have to be better, I have to be an arahant even. That's still an attachment. As you're developing, going deeper and deeper and deeper, we have to check with penetrative insight, understanding. Why am I doing this? That why is key. A very basic question to ask is this. Let's say you have a teacher that you devotedly follow. Whether they're alive or dead doesn't matter. But you devotedly follow them, their teachings, to the best of your ability. Every once in a while, you owe it to yourself and to the sasana to ask yourself this question: have I developed in my practice? Am I today improved in my sila, samadhi, panya than I was yesterday? Unfortunately, we're not doing that. We're still stuck on, my teacher happens to be so-and-so. My teacher was this. We used to have so many conversations. Oh, we have groups of my teacher's students who are here, who are there, who are this around the world. Who cares? So what? So what? Oh, I'm a Buddhist. Oh, I'm a this kind of, my teacher is this. Who cares? Has it improved the quality of your life? Basic. If you go to a doctor and the doctor gives you medicine and you pay a good amount of money and you take it as they prescribe, you take it. But aren't you going to ask yourself, is the sickness receding or not? How come we don't ask that in this case? Why? Because my teacher happened to be so. Who cares? Your teacher might actually be in hell. Even as a bhikkhu. There's plenty of bhikkhus in hell, by the way. I'm not saying your teacher was. But what I'm saying is, many people are holding their teachers like idols. Who cares? How is the quality of your life? Are you happy inside? Really? You can only know that. Is there tranquility in your mind, or are you attached to something? So if you go to the doctor and your headaches is still increasing, or whatever the medicine was for, it's not working, don't you owe it to yourself to go and to say to the doctor, excuse me, I've been taking this medicine for 3, 4, or 5 months or 3 years, and I'm paying you like religiously every month, and it's like, nothing is happening. Don't you say that? Or you have a car that's breaking down and every month you go and you pay 10,000 ringgits to, I don't know, to this mechanic to fix it. You drive the car one day and then the next day, pop, 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 the same thing. Aren't you going to take the car back and say, my friend, fix this? How come we don't do that when it comes to the Dhamma and expect miracles? It's like those people who chant expecting rain to come. Except that we chant expecting Nibbana to come. And may he attain the bliss of Nibbana eternal in his next life. What a mumbo-jumbo bag of nonsense. Nonsense. Where's the Dhamma in that? One time to a group of people full of actually almost 20 bhikkhus in the room who were chanting and were about to continue chanting, someone was asking me, was saying, oh, Bhante, let us pray for this. Something. He was a Buddhist. Everybody in the room was Buddhist. And those almost 20 monks, Theravadan Buddhists, like me. And I said loudly, we are Buddhists, sir. Householder, we are Buddhists. We don't pray. And he was stunned, and I looked over intentionally to look at the expression on the faces of the other bhikkhus, all of whom understood English, by the way. They kept chanting. That's what we're living in. But unfortunately, we are complicit. We are taking part in this whole deception by our non-action. That's why I'm here on this planet. That's why I'm a bhikkhu. To create Sangvega, at least in my life, and all those who are interested in listening to what I have to say, as much of life that I have in me still. That's all. That's what we owe to the Buddha. If you really, 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 really care for the Dhamma, make sure at least in your part, in your life, you have some Sangvega. How difficult is that? You have Sangvega about everything else in your life. If you are hungry and you don't eat, what happens to you? Do you go crazy eventually? Yes, you do. You start acting weird. Because you need energy, you need food. If you don't sleep for a few days, what happens? You have the necessity to go to sleep, otherwise you will crash and burn. If you don't work, who pays your rent, your mortgage? There's your Sangvega. That's why you get up every morning and you go to work, most of you. Why? Because if you don't work, they're going to throw you onto the street. You're not going to be able to pay for food for your loved ones. That is Sangvega. So you have Sangvega already. You protect your body. You're wearing masks. Why is that? You have Sangvega. You are concerned about your health. Okay, you have Sangvega. How come not about the Dhamma? That's my question. And everybody's taking it for granted that they're going to live forever, I guess. No, every one of you is going to be dead. Yeah, surprise, surprise. Every one of us will die. What are we doing about it? It's not a gloomy image. It's a factual image. It's a realism. And that's what the Dhamma does. Lord Buddha was here as a mirror for us, to see our stupidity, to see how idiotic we are in believing the stories we tell ourselves. And for 2,600 years almost, you do develop some very interesting stories that have nothing to do with the Dhamma. That's what you find in temples around the world. Sangvega, is it there or not? There is your clue. In chemistry, when I used to teach science, high school, I used to teach high school sciences, you have this thing called litmus testing, right? You know from the pH level if this is acidic or alkaline. You cannot convince yourself, oh, it's not, it's actually 8.6 pH level, so it is drinkable. No. No, it's not. Okay, so you take, we appreciate science in that sense. How come we don't appreciate this limited time we have on this planet? So focusing on your own progress removes you from mana, ditti mana, or even especially asmi mana, which is the conceit, I am different than you mentality. And you start taking action. This path is all about taking action. But you cannot take action without Sangvega, plain and simple. So I'll stop here, and my throat is like really starting. Let us share some merits before we go. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.